Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Let me now share my screen. All right. Once again, I would like to express my gratitude to Dr. Leonilo Capulso for this kind gesture of inviting me to this event, International Conference on Technology, Language Education, and Culture, Global Leader Awards Com Demonstration Teachings. Congratulations to all the paper presenters, as well as to the teacher demonstrators of this event. So this time, I'm going to talk about multilingualism in the classroom, perspectives from translanguaging lens. I know that the concept of multilingualism is no longer new to you, maybe because you've heard this one time or another, but the term translanguaging is actually emerging. That is why I decided to talk about translanguaging in the context of multilingualism. All right. So let me begin my talk, okay, for 10 minutes on bilingualism and translanguaging. Then I'll proceed to exploring on some research areas on translanguaging. So, conceptually, bilingualism, or let's begin first with bilingual, is defined as having or using two languages, especially as spoken with the fluency characteristic of a native speaker. A person using two languages, especially habitually, and with control like that of a native speaker. So that's very clear in the definition of Webster's Dictionary in 1961 that a bilingual person is a bilingual is a person who is actually proficient of two languages, say proficient in Filipino, proficient as well in English, something like that. And bilingualism as the constant oral use of two languages. However, according to Bloomfield in 1935, bilingualism is defined as the native-like control of two languages. So almost similar to the definition of Webster's dictionary in 1961, that bilingual is a person who is having proficiency in two languages. In McNamara 1962, a bilingual is defined as anyone who possesses a minimal competence in only one of the four language skills, say listening comprehension, speaking, reading, and writing in a language other than his mother tongue. And this is a very promising definition, well, in my perspective, because it considers someone can be considered bilingual even if he or she has only a minimal competence in another language, say only in reading, only in writing, or only in speaking. According to Tony in 1972, bilingualism is the individual's capacity to speak a second language while following the concepts and structures of that language rather than paraphrasing his or her mother tongue. Still, it talks about proficiency of the two languages. And this is the use of bilingualism is very is close to the concept of code switching in the classroom. I know that we're familiar with code switching, all right? Um, um, sh- so we have to like answer the following questions if whether or not code switching is actually let's say good, all right, in the classroom. Should code switching be permitted in the classroom? What types of code switching should be used? Because there are many types of code switching. Sometimes you have tag switching, intersentential, or intrasentential. Does code switching indicate a weakness in the language being acquired? It's also another issue that we need to look into. Is it another resource to be developed and used to the student's advantage? That's also a very nice question. So what are the functions of code switching? So code switching is important to increase comprehension since you're just able to or allowed to navigate one language to another language. So bilinguals use the language of the people they speak to know best. So you can better comprehend each other. Code switching to mark a change in context. Basically, this is an important discourse strategy that marks in context, formality, or mood. Maybe today you're being very formal, okay? You're using the English language, for example, but in another context, maybe just like in a minute, you meet your friend in a corridor and you're talking your vernacular because the person is just a friend. You're comfortable, you are familiar. So code switching is actually a this core strategy that marks changes in context and formality and even mood. According to Lin and Martin 2005 and Arthur and Martin 2006, describe the pedagogic potentials behind code switching. And this include increasing the inclusion, since there is a celebration of linguistic diversity, participation, and understandings of pupils in the learning processes. Exactly. This increases participation as well, because students are comfortable using their language in participation, developing less formal relationships between participants, and conveying ideas easily and accomplishing the lessons. Exactly. Conveying ideas more easily, since you are communicating with your students using the language that your students know best. But the trend in the classroom now are geared towards inclusion, as what you already mentioned, plus multilingualism minus the labels of language. Unlike in code switching, unlike in bilingualism, we are very specific to or particular on the languages, like somebody who is proficient at English and Filipino or other vernacular languages. But with the concept of this emerging trend that we're focusing on inclusion and of multilingualism minus the labeled languages, here now comes the term translanguaging. So what is translanguaging? According to Garcia, defines translanguaging as the language practices of bilinguals and the multiple discursive practices in which bilinguals engage in order to make sense of their bilingual worlds. Okay, so that's the key word here is that this is a language practice of bilinguals in order to make sense of their worlds, in order to make sense of their environment. Translanguaging is the act performed by bilinguals of accessing different linguistic features or various modes of what are described as autonomous languages in order to maximize communicative potential. So in order to be more understandable, in order to put your message across, you will be accessing, all right, your linguistic repertoire in order, again, to make meaning of yourself, in order to make meaning with what is happening around, in order to put your message across. Mazak, Rivera, and Soto say that or argue that flexible bilingual practice in the classroom allow for learners to emerge as bilinguals, able to articulate knowledge while focusing in the concept and not only on their use of one language or the other. So instead of focusing on the language, you are focusing on the concept. You're focusing more on understanding what the concept is all about, not necessarily on arguing or confusing on what language to use. So the terms bilingual and multilingual are viewed as one having proficiency in two or more languages respective. That's why I mentioned that when we talk of bilingualism or multilingualism, we are particular on labeled languages. So these labels continue to enforce the belief that languages are separate entities with finite boundaries. But in translanguaging, a sayer considers translanguaging as a verb and not a noun, which gives the interlocutors, the speakers of languaging, an agency to negotiate communicative tasks. Since there is an ongoing negotiation of meaning, so therefore, that's the time that you are like free to access all linguistic repertoires you have. Translanguaging makes multilingual speakers as social practitioners who negotiate their understanding and production of communicative tasks utilizing their fullest linguistic and semiotic resources. So, for example, you are meeting with someone whom, for example, doesn't know the English language, then you're going to go down to the level. If this person knows your vernacular, then you'll be communicating using your vernacular. So you'll be utilizing, okay, your fullest linguistic resources, including semiotic resources, not only words, but that includes sign language, okay, gestures and other expressions, just for you to understand each other. It is important to note that translanguaging takes as its focus how users engage with the totality of their resources, as in the totality of the resources, linguistic and semiotic resources. And this is a translanguaging education. You have students home languaging, languaging, you have students co-languaging, and here, as you can see, the bridge is termed as translanguaging because you can bring together your home language and school language in a particular context. There's no more demarcation line. So the process of creating these signs and the process of interpreting them is a process of translanguaging involving words, images, symbols, and colors, all of which are culturally and historically specific and significant. The one that I just told you, that not only that you translanguage using words, you also translanguage using signs and symbols. Bilingual speakers select meaning-making features and freely combine them to potentialize meaning-making, cognitive engagement, creativity, and criticality. So you'll be utilizing all your linguistic repertoires, okay, or all your linguistic potentials in order to make meaning of something that you would like to. According to Shah and others, 2019 supported the idea that translanguaging does not necessarily result from language deficiency, since even students with relatively high second language proficiency would naturally adopt translanguaging when engaging in informal classroom discussions. You see that? So it's not actually bad. So what are the research opportunities? One, you can go for systematic and contextualized translanguaging pedagogical strategies, which can be developed. You can go for institutions and teachers should have in-depth discussion about the approach used in their language policies and practices. Maybe you can also explore on worries on L1 overuse by students. You can also explore the effectiveness of translanguaging for teaching and learning, the possibilities of eliminating teachers' concerns, and the provision of effective implementation and guidance, since I know that there are still tensions, okay? Between parents and institution implementing translanguaging as a pedagogy in the school. And you can also unpack the tension, as what we already mentioned, for policymakers and parents, which are two other key stakeholders. Because sometimes parents I would like to enroll their children to like speak English speaking school only, something like that. You know, you can also explore the concept of code meshing as a pedagogical translanguaging tool. You can also explore in the effects of utilizing translanguaging practices in the early stages of education, say kindergarten, elementary education, particularly in elementary school. So perceptions and attitudes of students of translingual pedagogy in the classroom, how students perceive teachers doing translanguaging or translanguaging in the classroom. So in conclusion, English is increasingly used in multilingual encounters, and the use of multiple languages is a valuable asset. Exactly. It is a valuable asset if you are a multilingual. Your capacity and ability to utilize many languages in different contexts and different circumstances is a valuable asset. There is a need for teachers to gain what Kanagaraja terms translanguaging competence, the ability of a language used to purposefully utilize their linguistic and semiotic resources in multiple languages to better understand things, to better understand concerns. All right, like we don't need to use English language every time. Okay, sometimes we have to put ourselves in context. We need to appropriate our language given the context, given the people that we are communicating. Only in the translanguaging mode, where their entire, referring to the interlocutors, the speakers, repertoire is appreciated as a tool for rich and unfettered expression, are bilinguals granted license to operate at full or nearly full idiolect. So there is a celebration of like linguistic diversity here. There is an acceptance of multiculturalism here. So as a sort of reflection before I end, let's try to answer the following questions. How do you see translanguaging practices playing a role in your classroom? How do we support beginning and practicing teachers to interrogate their own language ideologies as a part of translanguaging shift? How can reflection and collaboration support teachers in developing and enacting a translanguaging stance as they engage in translanguaging praxis, the merging of theory and practice? How can we support teachers' enactment of translanguaging pedagogies? And last one, what additional support Do teachers need to confront monolingual paradigms with their students in their schools and districts and in school policies more broadly? And hopefully, um, these questions trigger you to go for research and be able to contribute later on to the ongoing debate of translanguaging in a monolingual classroom. Once again, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here.